Welcome back to What She Says Sports. All right. So I am on location. After a 13-hour journey today, I am ready to talk. All right. So if you saw the caption of the video, you are likely aware that a fan, a Colorado fan, has filed a $100 million lawsuit following the shameful public humiliation and premeditated plot to defame, humiliate, and discriminate against Shedeur Sanders. Now, I heard it was a man in Georgia, and I've seen several videos of people saying it's crazy, it's frivolous, and people are shocked. I'm like, why? Why are y'all shocked? I have been for days following the draft, pointing out, one, what you see on my screen. The NFL, there's evidence of how badly the NFL discriminates against Black QBs in the NFL draft, something we just witnessed with Shedeur Sanders. Now, people say they expect the lawsuit to be tossed out because it's frivolous. Actually, it's not. The person who filed it might actually be a lawyer. And if not, he likely knows that the NFL has a history of collusion, which was one of the claims: collusion, defamation, and racism, discrimination. This person likely understands that the NFL has a history of collusion. In fact, I've said it multiple times that it seems to be the favorite crime that the NFL likes to commit. And it goes all the way back to 1934, a gentleman's agreement, where the owners colluded to ban Black NFL players from the NFL. Because why? I've said it multiple times. Because random white people didn't have jobs. And they decided as a unit, as a group, that it wouldn't look good for Black NFL players to be getting paid while random white people don't have jobs. So that's how far back collusion goes in the NFL. It's not new. There's a history of it and it's documented. I've said it several times. I don't know why people don't know about this. The NFL was just found guilty of collusion right before the Super Bowl. Veteran QBs, Black veteran QBs, alleged that the NFL colluded against them when it came to veteran fully guaranteed contracts. And I realized why it is that they requested a fully guaranteed contract. Because after Deshaun Watson was, I guess he paid 22, 23 cases of misconduct, right? Civil lawsuits that he had to settle after he was accused by massage therapists, something we just heard Justin Tucker accused of misconduct. So Deshaun Watson had to settle those cases, and it ended up being 23 or 24 with the latest in 2022. So how is it that a quarterback for the Texans, who was already being kind of outspoken and painting the picture that the franchise was going down a wayward path, and when he requested a trade, the next thing that happens in the news, Deshaun Watson is accused of misconduct by one woman. Then it's a second woman and a third woman. So this was from 2021 to 2022. Well, guess what happened in 2022? Deshaun Watson got that trade. He actually got the trade that he asked for in 2021, but his character was smeared. And it seems that people on the ground in Houston at the time said that that's crazy that only Deshaun Watson was named because there were other players involved. So not only does Deshaun Watson get a trade to Cleveland, he gets a brand new, shiny $230 million fully guaranteed contract. The only fully guaranteed veteran contract in the history of the NFL. So Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, and Kyler Murray alleged that the NFL was colluding against them because they asked for what Deshaun Watson got, right? If you work somewhere and the job pays $89 million, and then somebody comes along and gets $230 million fully guaranteed, but you have to get your $89 million over 4 years. When it's time for you to renew, you're like, hey, I want that deal. I want the deal Deshaun Watson got. Because after all, Deshaun Watson was found settled 22 cases of misconduct. So when you settle 22 cases of misconduct, and then you turn around and get the trade that you asked for initially, and $230 million fully guaranteed, people are like, how does that work? Normally, you are not rewarded after you've been alleged of misconduct 22 or 23 times, and you've actually settled these cases, right? So what was it about Deshaun Watson's situation that the NFL decided to give him $230 million after this type of misconduct? And people blame Cleveland, the GM specifically, I believe Andrew Berry, who was kind of new at the time. But I want you to understand something. Nobody's giving out $230 million fully guaranteed without permission. So maybe Andrew Berry is the scapegoat. Maybe there was collusion against Deshaun Watson when he initially asked for a trade. And maybe the humiliation campaign that ensued, which was to bring up his dirt, was to put him in his place. How dare you ask for a trade? We talked about the NFL quarterback being the most important position on the team. It's coveted. We also talked about going back 9 decades. The NFL had a ban against Black players in the NFL, prohibiting them from becoming a quarterback. Then there are other challenges quarterbacks had to face. Warren Moon had to go to Canada first before the NFL would look at him, because why? The NFL did not believe that Black NFL players had the mental capacity to lead. Now, recently in 2021, the NFL settled a lawsuit, a civil rights lawsuit, where it alleged in its policies and practices that Black NFL players have lower cognitive functioning than white NFL players. That's major. That's huge. That's asserting that Black people are inferior to whites. There was a period where in the NFL and even in college, if you were a quarterback, say before Michael Vick, the NFL may have asked you to convert to wide receiver because it didn't believe that Black players had the cognitive functioning to lead teams. It believed that only white NFL players did. So the history's there. Racism, collusion. Now let's talk about defamation. Defamation is essentially lying on someone, trying to tarnish their character. Now, when it came to Shedeur Sanders, we heard for months leading up to the draft, he's cocky because he had his hat on backwards. Then someone put a side-by-side photo of Jackson Dart with the same hat on backwards, and it was crickets. And then, people, even Boomer Esiason, told us that the owners got together and colluded in the draft, decided to take Shedeur Sanders off the board because he was entitled. First of all, that is subjective. Two, do you have any evidence of this? So to be running around spreading these false narratives that people think are harmless is defamation of his character. Why are you trying to devalue his draft stock? What I was thinking about on my 13-hour journey today is it seems that the NFL, before it finds itself in situations where it's paying somebody like Deshaun Watson, who had to settle 22 of 23 cases, and he went from making $10 million when he asked for a trade. A year later, he's making $46 million a year, fully guaranteed. And it seems that however it came about, the owner, the Texan living next door to the lawyer who brought the cases and represented the women against Deshaun, was their goal to embarrass Deshaun Watson because, the NFL seems to look at Black players as less than equal. Because if you believe that Black NFL players have lower cognitive functioning than white NFL players, then you believe that Black NFL players are inferior and not equal to white NFL players. So the roles and responsibilities that you give to a white quarterback, you feel comfortable with a white quarterback leading because why? You believe his cognitive functioning is there. It's sufficient. But when it comes to the Black NFL player, you believe the cognitive functioning is lower, therefore it's deficient. It's not sufficient enough. So going back 9 decades, the NFL showed that it doesn't take too kindly to Black quarterbacks. It put hurdles in their way, discriminated against them, switched them off the wide receiver, embarrassed them, humiliated them. Go watch Evolution of a Black Quarterback. It's actually a documentary produced by Michael Vick. Now, Michael Vick in 2000, 2001, revolutionized the quarterback position with his physicality. The dual threat quarterback was born. And not just the dual threat quarterback, but it changed things. It paved the way for Black players, namely quarterbacks, who were thought to be less than whites and not deemed fit to hold a leadership position. It paved the way and it opened the door. Michael Vick was the first Black NFL player to be drafted #1 overall. Something you've heard that Caleb Williams was in 2024 or Bryce Young in 2023 or 2020 or 2022, right? So the history is there. What we witnessed against Shedeur Sanders was defamation. It was the intentional, premeditated destruction of his character in effort to reduce his draft stock. New evidence shows how badly NFL teams discriminate against Black QBs in the draft. Defamation is one of the tools used to discriminate. Lamar Jackson experienced it in the draft. Many people know that Lamar Jackson, who won the Heisman, which is, you can't get any better than that, right? Left to sit until number 32. Not that his character was poor publicly, but privately, they used what's called the Wonderlic test that they have since done away with. That was used to weed out quarterbacks and try to determine based on math equations, problem solving, if a QB would actually be a winner, successful. They used this test. Lamar Jackson had to take it, and they shared his test results, and they made fun of him. And they actually tried to insult his mental aptitude. They did it again to CJ Stroud. It's documented. So the man that actually filed the lawsuit alleging emotional distress, watching Shedeur be publicly humiliated. Someone maybe he's been watching since Shedeur was 15 years old. When you watch these players, you see them grow up, you cheer for them. The last thing you want to see are grown adults bullying them for the sole purpose of devaluing their draft stock so they can make less money. It happened to Lamar Jackson. It was actually said that Lamar Jackson suffered from what's called the dual threat curse, meaning the door that Michael Vick opened was actually considered a curse. Now, why would that be the case? Because there was resistance to the dual threat quarterback. Not every team wanted a dual threat quarterback. In fact, the New York Giants are one team that even right now has never had a starting QB1, which is the starter of the NFL team. Never. In fact, the New York Giants were the last team to ever to actually have a Black quarterback. So there was resistance to Black quarterbacks in the league in general overall. Then as the dual threat, Michael Vick, came along and opened the door, there were several NFL teams that wanted a Michael Vick because they saw the winning and they wanted to win too. But there are some NFL teams that even today that are accused of not drafting talent, but drafting for their preference, maybe blocking a Black quarterback from becoming QB1. So it's not frivolous. The NFL has a history of collusion, just found guilty recently. The NFL actually colluded against Lamar Jackson, when he became a free agent, the owners band together again, stood against Lamar Jackson, and no team wanted the MVP. He did nothing wrong. Collusion is not new in the NFL. Again, it seems to be the crime of choice, a normal way to conduct business, going back to what's called the Gentleman Agreement all the way to 1934, also against Black NFL players. So it's not new. Collusion is definitely there, and he can prove it if this goes to court. Racism is proven, is documented. To have racist policies and practices in 2021 and still fight about it in 2024, whereby you're saying that Black NFL players have lower cognitive functioning than white NFL players, you're essentially asserting that Black people everywhere are inferior to white people. That's problematic. So he can prove that there's a history of racism in the NFL. He can prove defamation against Shedeur Sanders. We've been talking about it on this podcast. The flimsy statement, the untrue statement that was put out. One of Shedeur Sanders' former offensive coordinators, Coach Pollock, pointed out that they need to stop the lies about Shedeur Sanders. It should be pointed out that there's only one NFL team, the one team that's never had a Black quarterback, that have put out defamatory, untrue statements against Shedeur Sanders. On the screen are several paragraphs of the most ridiculous narratives that are purely subjective that I've ever seen. There's one in here that states, when you get to the NFL, nobody cares who your daddy is. What the hell does that have to do with whether or not Shedeur Sanders should be drafted second or third? Nothing. It sounds personal. It sounds like there's someone who's upset that Shedeur Sanders has a famous father, just like Eli Manning and Peyton Manning did. And those same people that are upset with Shedeur having a famous father must believe that because Archie Manning orchestrated where his sons, Eli Manning in particular, would play, I guess they realized that the legendary Deion Sanders would also have the same ability. I mean, why would he not? Archie Manning is a legend. Deion Sanders is a legend. Why would they be held to a different standard? Why would Archie Manning be allowed to tell the NFL, my son is not going to the Chargers? He doesn't want to play for the Chargers. He's not going to the Chargers because they would ruin his career. Why would Archie Manning, why would that be okay? And why would people criticize and ostracize Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, for doing the same for Shedeur Sanders, his son, who's also a quarterback? There are teams out here that should be held accountable for mismanaging people's careers. There's one NFL team out here that has 40 starting quarterbacks, that are players that have taken a snap as QB. 40 in 25 years. 40. It's just a revolving door of quarterbacks with no accountability. The NFL needs oversight. If you have to pay $1 billion settlement in 2021 for practices that were the norm in slavery, race norming, asserting that Blacks are inferior to whites, the 3-5 rule, and you're using it when your players, your Black players, get concussions, you're essentially saying, well, your brain is already at a lower cognitive functioning, so I'm denying your claim for concussion, but you happily award the white players because you believe that their brains were already functioning high. So if they have CTE or some brain injury, you could see it. So you couldn't tell the difference between a brain injury in a white NFL player and a brain injury in a Black player because you held the black player to a lower standard. So the person that had the lawsuit should call me, because I would like to join your lawsuit and make it a class action. It's not frivolous. The person that filed the lawsuit obviously knew what many don't know. The NFL has a history of racism against black NFL players and black quarterbacks. What a lot of people didn't know this year, what they should have asked themselves, if Shedeur Sanders was not the only black quarterback in the NFL draft, there was Cam Ward. Shedeur Sanders was ranked number 2. And then you had Jalen Milroe. Some polls had him at 3, some had him at 4. But after Jalen Milroe ran a 4.37, he was clearly a lock to be the third best QB. And then there was other quarterbacks, and you had Dylan Gabriel, who was on the stage. With the Heisman, you had Will Howard, who won the Natty. So what was it about this year? That last year you had 3 black quarterbacks to go in the top 10. Number 1, Caleb Williams, who was considered a generational talent. And look at where his career is. Sacked 66 times. A pattern that can also be proven that when it comes to young black starting quarterbacks, they get sacked excessively. Is it humiliation? It's said that Caleb Williams needs to be fixed. Why would the Heisman winner coming out of college, who's a generational talent like Travis Hunter, need to be fixed? Why was it okay? Bryce Young won the Heisman. Went to Carolina, was sacked somewhere between 62 and 91 times. Bryce Young was blamed, but not the organization itself. Bryce Young was humiliated. Some saying that because who his girlfriend left him for and who else she was involved with was a problem for his woes. But Bo Nix had the opportunity to start and struggle. And just like Jackson Dart, when he wore his hat back versus Shedeur, crickets. We saw how Russell Wilson was treated in Denver, likely around the time that the collusion case was underway. We saw how he was belittled on the field, no respect from his coach. He was also, Russell Wilson, sacked 100 times. Was that retaliation because he alleged that the NFL colluded against black veteran QBs? So the history of racism against black QBs is there. The NFL was found guilty of collusion in that very case with Russell Wilson. So there is evidence. If this goes to trial, he could win because the evidence is documented. It's proven. There's a history. It's not new. So I don't know why anybody thinks it's frivolous other than the fact that they are uninformed of the pattern of history of discrimination, collusion, and defamation. Shedeur Sanders' phone number was sent out to 2,000 people by the NFL itself, who, by the way, scapegoated the Atlanta Falcons. It alleged that the Atlanta Falcons was responsible for not taking the proper steps to be in compliance to secure Shedeur Sanders' data, his personal information, and that it fined the defensive coordinator who did not take the steps to secure his Atlanta Falcons issued electronic device, that it is alleged that his son accessed without authorization and took Shedeur's number and then executed a prank by he gave the number to his friend who went to Ole Miss. And the person that went to Ole Miss is who's seen on camera actually making the call to prank Shedeur, and he's reading from a script. Somebody wrote down what he should say, who he's calling, who he's supposed to pretend to be. And this is all happening right as the Saints, who some believe would pick Shedeur Sanders, went and chose a different quarterback, Tyler Shaw. Now, how did the Ole Miss caller have inside information enough to tell Shedeur Sanders, you have to wait a little longer? How did he know Shedeur Sanders was actually not being picked by the team whose general manager he impersonated, Mickey Loomis, the New Orleans Saints? How did he know Shedeur was going to have to wait? Because he was with the son of an NFL executive. He had inside information. His Ole Miss sweatshirt points to a connection, a pipeline of quarterbacks from Ole Miss University to one team in particular, the New York Giants. The one team that is on the record for defaming Shedeur Sanders, saying he's entitled. He has an entourage. I think they mean a film crew. He has shows that are produced by other companies, so they film him. This is the modern era of social media and content. It's not hard to understand, but to try to stereotype Shedeur Sanders and say he has an entourage in the same manner of which LeBron James was stereotyped when it was said by NBA executives and or coaches, people who have influence, that LeBron James had a posse. Those are cultural stereotypes against Black people. Entourage is the modern term. Posse is from the era of LeBron James when he was coming out of high school. LeBron James suffered the same public humiliation, defamation of his character, and there was collusion against him to set him up to take the fall for being gifted a jersey, which, by the way, got him eliminated from like the state championships for his team, and he wasn't allowed to play. And it seems that because at that time he already decided he's going to the NFL, to the NBA, and there were people that were upset about that, so they wanted to change the outcome of that championship game. So they set up LeBron James and just walked up to him and handed him something. And rather than it fall on the ground, he's like, what is this? And he was photographed with the item, and it's like LeBron James took a gift. That's collusion. It's not new in sports. It's not new in the NBA. It's not new in the NFL. Will it be hard for the man from Georgia to prove that the NFL colluded against Shedeur Sanders? No, not at all. Because before the NFL Combine, where Shedeur Sanders was called cocky because he's confident, before he was being stereotyped by someone, a coach, head coach from the New York Giants, who are now moving away from the statements they made about Shedeur, who also have connections to Ole Miss, the prank caller. It's been said that the GM's daughter went to Ole Miss with Jackson Dart. She penned a letter to Jackson Dart after her father's team, the New York Giants, drafted Jackson Dart. It's alleged that she went around liking the prank. That could be proven, maybe, maybe not. But there clearly is an Ole Miss connection at the QB position with Archie Manning, Eli Manning, and now Jackson Dart to the New York Giants, who have never had what? A Black QB1, starting quarterback, meaning this quarterback plays the majority of the games. Now, after Jackson Dart was drafted, interestingly enough, the New York Giants posted that Russell Wilson will be the starter. The same Russell Wilson that was sacked 100 times and integral to the collusion case where the NFL was found guilty of collusion right before the Super Bowl. The same Russell Wilson that was humiliated on the field by his then head coach Sean Payton, the same Russell Wilson who just led the Pittsburgh Steelers to the playoffs as QB1, and he was forced out to where? The Giants. So the anonymous man from Georgia has a case. He has ample evidence to prove the history and the pattern of collusion, racism against Black NFL players, Black quarterbacks, veterans, and in the NFL draft, defamation against Shedeur, defamation against Lamar Jackson, defamation against CJ Stroud, whose mental aptitude test results they passed around. What was the NFL doing when it sent out Shedeur Sanders' phone number to 2,000 people before the NFL draft? Why was there a waiver wire attached to it? Shedeur Sanders did not work there, so he definitely would not already be on a waiver wire. Were they also making fun of Shedeur Sanders and the plot that was predetermined that he will be cut from whatever team he goes to? Because it's already been discussed that he was not going to be drafted at all. So why would a top promising elite quarterback, who likely would be number one on the depth chart in the NFL, to the second neediest QB team out there, could have been the Cleveland Browns, who courted Shedeur extensively on the record? Could it be the New York Giants, a team that has never had a Black QB1? And we know Shedeur Sanders did not go to Ole Miss, so he didn't meet the criteria to be preferred because he went to Ole Miss. He didn't meet the criteria because he's not a white quarterback. But he is a Black elite QB1. So let's say had Shedeur Sanders gone to Cleveland, the team that courted him extensively, until the owner came out and said something that is a bit concerning. And we'll talk about that. So you have Cam Ward coming off the board as an elite Black QB1. If you look at Tennessee's depth chart, Cam Ward is QB1. He's also the 16th Black starting quarterback. There are 32 teams. 32 in half is what? 16. So who's number 17? If a Black quarterback is selected in the first round, and likely will be QB1 because we're talking about QB1 needy teams like the Cleveland Browns. If Shedeur Sanders was drafted by Cleveland with the second overall pick, he would be what? Listed on the depth chart at number 1 as QB1, likely to get the starting position. Because as we see, Cam didn't even have to compete for it. They need a quarterback. He's our guy. He's the best. Cleveland needs a quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is the second best QB. He's our guy. He's our starter. Just like Cam Ward, right? That would make Shedeur Sanders the 17th QB1, giving Black starting quarterbacks the majority. That's historic for the NFL. When you look at how the NFL worked tirelessly 9 decades ago, banning Black players from even being QB. Then when they make it past being deterred from wide receiver, something that Lamar Jackson went through, he was asked to work out as a wide receiver. Lamar Jackson is right now one of the best dual threat quarterbacks of the modern era after Michael Vick. And he faced a lot of resistance from NFL executives, people with influence. So is it hard to see that Shedeur Sanders, being the one QB selected to the second team, the second neediest QB team, the Cleveland Browns, who had extensive interest in meetings and interest public on the record with Shedeur Sanders? Is it hard to see that when Shedeur Sanders becomes the majority, that some people might be upset about that. It should not be, because the New York Giants, who are the third neediest QB team, has never had a black starting quarterback, because the NFL has come a long way from banning black players from becoming quarterbacks, from ostracizing them and trying to deter them by switching their position to wide receiver. You have the speed. So I'd rather you be a wide receiver. And when Lamar Jackson said no, he was also humiliated. And his mental aptitude scores were shared, and he was mocked, put down. It's like an inside thing that happens. It's documented. Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Shedeur Sanders. And for the NFL to knowingly fine the Atlanta Falcons for breaching Shedeur Sanders' data when it knew it was the NFL itself, why would you do that? Why would you scapegoat your own organization when you know that it was the league itself? And why would the league do something like this? Is it for the same reason that they shared CJ Stroud's mental aptitude scores between themselves, like they did Shedeur Sanders' phone number, like they did Lamar Jackson's mental aptitude scores, to make fun of? You're making fun of Lamar Jackson's mental aptitude at a time when you're asserting that black NFL players have lower cognitive functioning than white NFL players. You're making fun of CJ Stroud's mental aptitude at a time where you just settled $1 billion lawsuit and promised to stop doing what is known as race norming, which comes out of slavery, which ended in the late 1800s. And then you're making fun of Shedeur Sanders for sending his phone number over, and you're sending it around on an email. And you're making fun because you attach a waiver wire, because you're asserting, oh, you're giving us your new number, but you're going to be cut. And this goes to 2,000 people. That's a lot of people to be in on the joke. So when does a joke go from being funny to cruel? The anonymous man from Georgia has a case. I would like to join it. And I'm sure there were others that would like to join and make it a class action lawsuit. And I think $100 million is too low. The NFL settled a $1 billion lawsuit, a civil rights violation, which that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the NFL has violated the civil rights of Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Shedeur Sanders. And then let's talk about the quarterbacks that get sacked endlessly. Top 3 for the last 3 years are all your rookies. Black rookie QBs. Bryce Young. Is it a setup to humiliate? Because it is humiliating to win the Heisman and then be sacked 62 and 91 times. It is humiliating for Caleb Williams to win the Heisman also and to be sacked the most, 66, 67 times. There were already posts going around asking, how many times will Shedeur Sanders be sacked? Now, that's nothing fans can control. That takes place from within. And then there's CJ Stroud, who made them a gaggle of money by putting the Texans on his back, being relentlessly also sacked excessively. But in year 2, his O-line just suddenly couldn't get it together. And he was sacked 52 times. So people are like, what about the class of 2024? I said, well, Caleb Williams got sacked and humiliated. They said they need to fix him. So asserting that he isn't that good, maybe they believe that his mental aptitude and his cognitive functioning is lower There may be white rookie QBs like Bo Nix. The anonymous man from Georgia has a case. The evidence is there. Collusion, defamation, racism. So I just want to join the lawsuit and make it a class action. And I'm sure we'll get other people. There's more evidence than what we've just discussed. What people don't understand is the NFL has not been fined for sharing Shedeur Sanders' data with 2,000 people who did not need to know with the waiver wire attached. So should we sit back and watch and see if Shedeur Sanders is cut from Cleveland? Because they clearly did not give him the number 2 jersey. They assigned him number 12. It's also asserted that Cleveland was in on the cruelty towards Shedeur Sanders, knowing they were never, ever going to draft him. They courted him, met with him extensively. Even in NFL insider Matt Schefter posted right after the combine that he was pretty certain that Cleveland was taking a quarterback at number 2. They met with Shedeur Sanders extensively. And then somewhere around March 31st, the owner makes a public statement that could have easily been a private conference call between the GM, Andrew Berry, and himself. The owner stated to the media that we took a big swing and missed with Deshaun Watson. That's very interesting. Why was Andrew Berry allowed to approve a $230 million fully guaranteed contract for someone who had just settled 22 of 23 civil lawsuits alleging misconduct? The league was okay with that? Why? Is it because there was a collaborative effort to put out dirt on Deshaun Watson because how dare he ask for a trade? So they thought they would smear Deshaun Watson and actually ensnared others that they didn't want to make publicly known? Because how does a GM that was just hired get this assignment, thereby being scapegoated to take the fall? Was it a rookie mistake? Why was it approved by the Cleveland Browns? Why was it approved by the league? Those are all questions that need to be answered. Very interesting case. Before the NFL Combine, Mel Kiper Jr. shared on podcast on the 20th of February, just right after the Super Bowl, that an NFL insider, not an ESPN insider, but an NFL insider, somebody with influence, came to him and told him that Shedeur Sanders is not the type of quarterback the NFL is looking for now. That the NFL is not looking for quarterbacks like Shedeur Sanders now. That the NFL is not looking for that kind of quarterback like Shedeur Sanders. So if you knew this before the combine, before all of the he's cocky, he's entitled, he has an entourage statements, why did you not just disinvite him from the combine? If you clearly didn't want quarterbacks, plural, like Shedeur Sanders, why did you just disinvite Shedeur Sanders? Did you want him to be around to exploit him for views? And since you wanted him to be around, there were people who decided to defame him, knowing that it would what? Reduce and negate his draft stock. So why would you have somebody around when you don't want quarterbacks like Shedeur Sanders? What exactly does that even mean? Mel Kiper Jr. went on to discuss that Shedeur Sanders is a pocket passer, a pure pocket passer, and that Pocket passers are old school quarterbacks that what he referred to as the running around guys, the Michael Vicks, Deshaun Watsons, Lamar Jackson, even though it was said Lamar Jackson suffered from the dual threat curse, just as Deshaun Watson did. The running around guys like them are what's supposed to be desirable, and that Shedeur Sanders is not like that. He's like a Joe Burrow. He's a pocket passer. Now, we have seen Shedeur Sanders use his legs to score, and it's documented on film. So he's not a pure pocket passer. I think he might be more of a hybrid. He might not be Lamar Jackson, but not a lot of people are, except for Jalen Milroe, who was pushed down to number 94. So why was he negated? Running a 4.37 and being compared to a two-time MVP. So if you knew that Shedeur Sanders was not the type of quarterback the NFL is looking for now, the type of quarterbacks the NFL is looking for now, not this kind of quarterback, meaning pocket passers, why did the New York Giants draft Jackson Dart from Ole Miss? He's a pure pocket passer. And he's not better than Shedeur Sanders. So why would Jackson Dart go to the New York Giants, who, by the way, have never had a what? Black QB1. If Shedeur Sanders went to the New York Giants, he would be their first Black QB1. So did the Giants select Jackson Dart, who's not better than Shedeur? Because one, he went to Ole Miss like Archie Manning and Eli Manning. And it's well known that Archie Manning orchestrated where his son Eli Manning went. And maybe Archie Manning had a hand in orchestrating where his Ole Miss alum QB, Jackson Dart, went. And that's why Jackson Dart went to New York instead of Shedeur Sanders. And maybe is it quite possible that the only team to defame Shedeur Sanders, it's not a coincidence that it's also the New York Giants, who, one, have never had a Black starting quarterback, and two, they preferred the Ole Miss connection. So you ask yourself, well, I mean, is there anything wrong with wanting to get a lesser talented quarterback because one of the legends in the NFL went to Ole Miss and his son went to Ole Miss and played for the Giants also? And let's get Jackson Dart, who went to Ole Miss. Maybe he'll be successful. Maybe. But the NFL is a meritocracy built on talent, not preference. And it seems that the New York Giants, since the NFL began, has not preferred to have a Black starting quarterback. Noted they were the last team who preferred to have a Black quarterback at all. So was the defamation against Shedeur Sanders intentional to lower his draft stock so the New York Giants, who have never had a Black starting quarterback, a Black QB1, could justify taking a lesser talented Jackson Dart, who is white, lesser talented than Shedeur Sanders, because that's just what they want to do. And it's no, we're not worried about winning. We want to fulfill this Ole Miss QB connection. We want to maybe make sure that we still don't have a Black starting quarterback. Maybe that's why they decided after Jackson Dart was drafted that Russell Wilson is going to be QB1. We shall see. So why would the coach of the New York Giants try to stereotype Shedeur and say he has an entourage when really he just has a film crew? That he's entitled, which is purely subjective, and he has absolutely no proof of saying that Shedeur feels like somebody owes him something. Why would the quarterback coach from the New York Giants try to defame Shedeur behind the guise of anonymity, but was exposed? So that's 2 of 3 statements coming from one team. So it just seems like the New York Giants gained up on Shedeur Sanders and lowered his stock intentionally through defamation so they could justify taking a lesser talented QB that they preferred. Jackson Dart. If their fan base is okay with that, and the owner of the team is okay with building for preference rather than building to win, why do we care? Because the GM is on the hot seat and could be fired. So what is the Ole Miss connection with the prank caller, where the NFL released Shedeur Sanders' phone number to 2,000 people who did not need to know with a waiver wire? And of the 2,000 people that received Shedeur Sanders, the number ends up in the hands of an Ole Miss connection to the New York Giants, the same team that is the only team to defame Shedeur Sanders, the same team that has never had a black starting quarterback. So it seems that the New York Giants went through great lengths to make sure that Shedeur Sanders was not on their squad, and they could justify it picking a lesser talented Jackson Dart, because if the season doesn't go well, they just get to say, well, Shedeur Sanders wasn't good because he's entitled. He has an entourage. That's what it looks like. They lied on Shedeur Sanders. They defamed him. They destroyed his character, or attempted to. And then there's the prank. The NFL made it possible for the prank to even be executed by sending Shedeur Sanders' phone number to 2,000 people who did not need to know. And is it a coincidence? It just ends up in the hands of someone from Ole Miss who has a pipeline to the New York Giants. And to this moment, that prank caller has not been identified. It seems there's a concerted effort to try to forget that the prank caller, some way, shape, or form, represents Ole Miss and or has a connection to executives who have influence in the New York Giants, where several coaches have defamed Shedeur Sanders. So the anonymous person from Georgia has a case. Definitely a defamation can be proved. The statement that was sent out to say that Shedeur Sanders is going to experience a culture shock when he actually walks into a real NFL locker room. Shedeur Sanders is seen photographed as a preteen throwing the football with Peyton Manning and his father, Deion Sanders. So I doubt he will experience any sort of culture shock in the NFL because he grew up around the NFL, which makes it even more disgusting that people he was seen in rooms with at the Super Bowl, having casual conversations with the commissioner, Roger Goodell, will collude against him, making him collateral damage. Because even after the NFL insider told Mel Kiper Jr. that the NFL does not want quarterbacks, plural, like Shedeur Sanders, they don't want that kind of quarterback now. And they already illustrated that they'd have no problem with pocket passes because they drafted Jackson Dart. And then we have Josh Allen, who's actually a dual threat and is documented working to become a pocket passer. So if we aren't talking about pocket passers, what is it about Shedeur Sanders that the NFL doesn't want right now? Is it because he likes jewelry? Because we know NFL players like jewelry. And it's not specific to Black NFL players. Is it nice cars? No, because why? If you go to any practice facility, NFL players have nice cars across racial lines. So what is it about Shedeur Sanders that the NFL does not want now? Maybe it doesn't want any more Black elite QB1s. Because if Shedeur Sanders had gone to Cleveland after the extensive visits with Cleveland, all the way until after the We Ain't Hard to Find showcase, if Shedeur Sanders had gone to Cleveland, second round, second pick, first round, he would be QB1, number 17 of 32, thereby giving Black QB1s the majority. A feat that's historic in the NFL, especially after the ugly discriminatory history and practices against Black NFL players and Black quarterbacks. the humiliation, the defamation of their character, the mockery, the trying to dissuade, to asserting they have lower cognitive functioning than whites. Does the NFL believe that Shedeur Sanders has lower cognitive functioning than Jackson Dart? And is that why Jackson Dart went to a team that has never had a black starting quarterback? Is that why the Giants have never had a black starting quarterback? They actually believe what the NFL has practiced and upheld via policy. Race norming. It says it right here. The NFL has what? New evidence shows how badly teams discriminate against black QBs in the draft. So Shedeur Sanders being discriminated against is not new because he's a black quarterback. There is a history of black quarterbacks being discriminated against in the draft. Something the person who filed the lawsuit is pointing out. And it did cause him emotional distress because he's seen it before. And Shedeur Sanders' case was just all the while, it's not new, it's the most extreme. And why was it the most extreme? Because if Shedeur Sanders had gone to Cleveland, the second pick, not only would he have made approximately $50 to $70 million over the next 4 years, black QB1s, black starting quarterbacks will be the majority. So is that why, after Cleveland met with Shedeur Sanders extensively, even Schefter pointing out after the combine, before the combine, that Cleveland is likely going to use its number 2 pick on a QB. Shedeur Sanders weighs number 2. Maybe that's just a coincidence. But they were going to get a QB, and they visited with Shedeur extensively. Shedeur seemed to be their guy. So what changed? On March 31st, the owner came out and said something that was concerning because what was said was always known. We took a big swing and miss with Deshaun Watson. This is said publicly. This could have been said privately to the GM because essentially you're saying the GM made a mistake with Deshaun Watson. Did he? Was he forced to do it? That's a different video. So if the GM is being publicly put on the record to the media, we took a big swing and missed. Andrew Berry took a big swing and missed, and he's been meeting with Shedeur Sanders extensively. Therefore, we need to fix that issue first. And then Schefter comes back and says he's no longer confident that the Cleveland Browns are going to use that number 2 pick for a quarterback. Cleveland was still meeting with Shedeur, but then they also started secretly meeting with the number 94 pick, Dylan Gabriel. So why didn't Cleveland just tell Shedeur instead of keep meeting with him, even after the showcase at CU Pro Day, April 4th? Why didn't they just say, hey, you know what? We're just going to have to go in a different direction. Why didn't the owner, before the draft started, before the combine started, just come out and say, hey, our needs are not at quarterback because we took a big swing and missed with Deshaun Watson, thereby wasting Shedeur Sanders' time. But at this point, they had him invested, and it seemed like he was a lock until March 31st. And they did an about face, but they were already secretly meeting with the QB that they selected, Dylan Gabriel. You could hear Andrew Berry trying to justify and say that Shedeur Sanders' price was out of alignment relative to the draft. So why did you meet with him extensively? You know he's a QB1. Everybody knew. The morning of the draft, he was locked out of the QB1 round because nobody had a grade. Collusion? How is it 32 teams? Out of 32 teams, not one team had a grade on Shedeur Sanders, who throughout the entire draft was projected to go based on talent. Because we're trying to build winning teams here, to a quarterback needy team. Cleveland or the Giants. Now, between those two teams, based on what you know about the Giants and their history of never having a black starting quarterback, their pipeline to Ole Miss QBs through Archie Manning, Eli Manning, and their selection. And then there's Cleveland, who met with Shedeur extensively. See, the owner always knew that they needed to bury themselves out of the hole with the Deshaun Watson contract. So why did you waste Shedeur Sanders' time? Why did you go on the record that you're courting or you're meeting with Shedeur Sanders extensively, but then you're discreetly and privately meeting with Dillon Gabriel, who fits better because why? You don't have the money to secure Shedeur Sanders, who likely would make approximately $50 to $70 million, whereas Dillon Gabriel might make 5 or 6. So Dillon Gabriel fits. So why the extensive meetings with Shedeur Sanders, or why the about face? Was that always the plan? Did the owner suddenly remember the Deshaun Watson fully guaranteed contract, the only veteran QB fully guaranteed contract in the history of the NFL? Did the owner forget that it owes Deshaun Watson $46 million a year? Or was the plan always, because the NFL insider told Mel Kiper Jr., that the NFL did not want quarterbacks like Shedeur Sanders, but then they allowed him to go to the draft and to get engaged. With the audience, with the media, only to be torn down. Why didn't the NFL disinvite Shedeur before the combine? Why didn't Cleveland align itself with its priorities before the combine, engaging Shedeur Sanders? If that was the case, maybe there would be no defamation because Shedeur Sanders would not be at the combine, but then would the ratings be good? So did the NFL exploit Shedeur Sanders for ratings because they know he's famous, but then that's also one of the negatives that they see about him, because everywhere he goes, things follow him. He has an entourage or a camera crew. So you exploited him for his fame, but you defamed him and stereotyped him with an entourage as if it was just something he wanted to do rather than the business of the brand of Shedeur Sanders. There's a lot of questions here that in a court of law, with a lawsuit brought forward by this anonymous person from Georgia alleging racism, defamation, and collusion, it can be proven. So I just want to be added to the lawsuit because guess what? This could easily go from $100 million to $1 billion. Whether 8 additional people file a lawsuit or 9 additional people file a $100 million lawsuit alleging the same defamation, collusion, and racism, which is already documented, which is already proven, which the pattern already exists. Or 10 people could join together and be added to the lawsuit that came out that has enough sufficient evidence to prove defamation, collusion, and racism in the NFL. So we'll talk soon. Let me know your thoughts. Clearly somebody's trying to get next to me, so I got to go handle that. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching What She Said Sports.
That's